Welcome, mate. Mate, thank you so much.
It's too easy.
Mate, I I first learned about you about a year ago, and what you have overcome and what you've achieved is fucking incredible. But for those people that don't know your story, are you able to just sort of share where you grew up and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, well, that's obviously we go a long way back there with that. But I started off in Melbourne. I was born down there, and I got two older brothers. I'm the youngest, and my father, he was a Hell's Angel bikie member. My mum was just a normal lady, straighty 180 sort of lady, and she ended up taking off when I was 8. She had enough of all the bullshit surrounding the bikie life, I suppose, and us kids were well, fucking rugrats too, mate, like we didn't do her any favours, that's for sure. And yeah, she took off when I was about 8. Then we were left with dad, and he was obviously he was a bikie member, and he didn't know the first thing about being a father, you know what I mean? So he had to pretty much just bloody pick it all up and bloody have a crack, which my hat goes off to him. Like he definitely gave it his best crack, like he could have went so many different ways with it, but he put all his old life beside him and had a crack at raising us kids, and that sort of happened by moving away from Melbourne. We went to Phillip Island first and spent a couple of years there, but he sort of didn't feel like it was far enough away. So that's when we moved up north to Rockhampton. We had no real plan of where we were going. Like Dad's just like, all right, we're out of here, and we were driving up the east coast of Australia. We pulled up at Rockhampton actually to just like spend the night and stop driving sort of thing. Dad had a little bit of a look around while he was there, and he's like, what do you think of this place? And I was bloody just sick to death of bloody driving, really. I'm like, yeah, this will be too, like being an 8-year-old kid, I was like, yeah, all right, this will do. And that's how we ended up there. So that seemed far enough away from Melbourne because Mum, she ended up meeting some other bloke a couple of years later, and, Dad didn't want to sort of get involved in any of that sort of stuff just in case he did something stupid. And then us kids ended up with no bloody parents, that's the last thing he wanted to do. So he made a good couple of decisions there after Mum took off. And then, yeah, ended up there and started going to school and all that sort of stuff. And that's where started getting into trouble a fair bit up there. There's not much doing up in Rockhampton. There's bloody, you drinking, fighting, bloody all sorts of bloody stuff. There's not much going on up there. So play football and drink piss and, all that sort of stuff. And that's where started getting into a bit of trouble as well. So, and then I ended up getting a few assault charges and all that just from just regular boy sort of stuff. But, when you got no, say, parental guidance with that sort of stuff, my dad was pretty fucking easy going with most things, Like I said, he was just winging it himself. He didn't really sort of, know too much about the Father of the Year award, you know what I mean? So we sort of just run amok and obviously started getting into trouble, and that's eventually I ended up in jail. Yeah, so that's the first bit of, a little path of where I was going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you think of the memory that you had in your childhood that was painful, and what was your initial reaction, I guess, to experiencing what you had experienced throughout your whole entire childhood into that? Because I think, as I was saying before the interview, success leaves clues. And if you look at some of the most influential people on the planet, they've been through some sort of pain. They've been through some sort of adversity. But the question I have for you, mate, is if there was a period in time that was painful, what would you say to your younger self?
Yeah, right. Well, obviously, when Mum first took off when I was young, that sort of that hit me pretty hard too, because like my dad was a bit of a sort of a rough sort of a dude, and obviously we gelled with Mum a fair bit because we were with her a lot. Dad was off with his mates and that all the time and all that, so we gelled a lot more with Mum. But then once she sort of took off, that sort of hit home a bit too. So that was the first real thing that I remember of like just being scared, I suppose. Being a young kid. But yeah, like I said, once Dad made a few of the right decisions and that, and like I said, he turned it all around as best as he could. But yeah, one thing, I used to play basketball when I was younger, and I used to really enjoy that, and I was really good at it too, And that's one thing I look back and I really regret stopped doing that, because once we got up to Rockhampton, I got into the local basketball teams and all that sort of stuff, and I was doing that heaps, and all my games were falling on a Friday and a Saturday night. And all my mates from school were going out to parties and bloody drinking and chasing women around and all that sort of stuff. And I was going to basketball. And it didn't take long before I started venturing, skipping bloody practice and going with me mates instead of playing on the weekend and all that sort of stuff. And that was a little crossroad in my life that I look back at and go, that's where you should have went left. So that was a big one. So if I could say something to my younger self there, it would have been, like, don't worry about the carrot dangling over here, keep your mind on the job, and if I had this head on my shoulders back then, that's exactly what I would have done. That's what I preach these days, because I know it works.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that would have been the main thing I would have said to my younger self, that's for sure.
And your experience of being incarcerated, mate, a lot of people think about what it would be like to be in prison, and you have some time to reflect on the mistakes you've made. But what was your experience like, mate? How long were you incarcerated for?
All up, 14 and a half years. Yeah, so it all started back when I was 19. I got locked up for 6 months, and yeah, that was an eye opener. Like, but I was a little rat bag at that stage, and just a knucklehead like most bloody young kids, and then I ended up in prison, and a few eye-opening situations in there as a young kid too. Just the realizing the danger that you can get yourself into and all that, because you're surrounded by maniacs too. You know what I mean? It's not like, and up in Rockhampton, it's not like you've got like a first timer unit or whatever.
You're in there with
You're just in there with everyone, mate. So you could be living next door to a murderer or a rapist or whatever. Like, so you don't know who you're mixed in with. So as a young kid too, you're probably not thinking like that too much, because your brain's not fully developed yet, is it? So yeah, and obviously heaps of violence in there. You're learning all these little jail rules that they've got, and, yeah. So that was 6 months when I was 19, and I got out. And I was out for a little while and just straight back into me with me mates, just bloody being idiots again. Didn't take long before I landed myself back in prison when I was 22. And because I went down to Melbourne for a little while in between there. And if I stayed in fucking Rockhampton the whole time, I probably would have been back in jail a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So, yeah, then I ended up back in jail when I was 22 for a home invasion that it wasn't even me. A few of my mates sort of got into this trouble and, went and give this bloke a touch up at his house, and I was found on the streets that same night. The victim said there was a tall masked man in amongst the group that went to the house, and I was found on the street that night. And because I had a reputation by the police in Rockhampton as like a little rat bag, just getting up to all sorts of things, they actually, thought that that was me, and I ended up in jail for like 18 months for something I didn't even do. But I didn't do myself any favors, like it's not like I'm an innocent bloke, and I'm not innocent by any means of heaps of stuff, but that particular thing I didn't do. But then once it got to the committal hearing where they had to produce the evidence to see if the judge was going to hand it up to the next district court, he realised that there was no evidence there except for there was a tall masked man, and I was found on the street that night. And he's like, this is not enough to convict this bloke, and he had to drop the charges, and then they'll let me go. So I spent, that amount of time in there, buddy. And yeah, so that was a bit of a, bit of a shock as well, but didn't take long, mate, before I ended up, cut a long story short, this bloke attacked my dad with a knife at his house one day, and I caught up with the bloke once I got out of prison after that 18 months. And, I punched him. I punched him that much till I couldn't lift my arms anymore, and they locked me up for 11 years for that one. Yeah, so I was only out 7 months from that 18-month one, and then back for 11 years straight after that.
And how old were you at that time?
24.
24. Yeah. And while you're in there, mates, what because there's two directions you can go. What was the pivotal moment that shifted in your mentality where you said to yourself, I can't fucking live my life like this anymore. I need to make a change. Was there a pivotal moment that went off?
Yeah, definitely. I got locked up in 2009 for that big one. And obviously, like, I'd been around long enough to know what sort of trouble I was in. And I just knew. I knew I was up for a tenner. I knew I was going for a 10-year period. I already knew it before I even went to court. I already. And I'd been in about 12 months. And about 2010, I had that moment in my mind of just like, what am I doing with my life? You know what I mean? And always playing the poor me card of, my upbringing and all this sort of stuff, and, so many different things. And that was when I just stopped pointing all the fingers at everything else and everyone else, and I started looking in the mirror at myself, and that's when I really started turning my life around. It's all me. It all come down to the choices that I make, and then I just really started practicing on my mental strength more than anything, and didn't take long before I started gaining strength in all aspects of my life, even though I was still in prison.
Yes.
I was like practicing little things, like say, even with like dieting, whatever it might be, or like smoking cigarettes, and I just had enough of them one day, and I just went, I'm not doing this no more. And I didn't. I've never had another drag of a cigarette ever again. And I sat them there in my cell. I looked at them every day. And I just challenged myself with it, and they sat there for a month. I just looked at them every day.
Yes.
I just didn't let it get the better of me, and I just never had another one. And that's when I sort of realised, like, I've got something up here, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not bloody useless, so I can do something if I want to do it, And then I started challenging myself with like dieting and stuff like that, because I was into my training and all that sort of stuff, because I've never really been like, usually jail gets put side by side with drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Never really been a drug addict or anything. I smoked a bit of pot when I was a kid. That I had an addiction back then, but I grew out of that too. I've never really been addicted to any hard drugs. Like, I've experimented with every single fucking thing there is. because I've got a pretty strong mindset. Like I haven't got an addictive personality,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so I challenge myself with certain things like food or like whatever. Say I might, you know, like chips or whatever, and I just wouldn't do it. And then I'd eliminate something else. Then I'd eliminate something else, and I just always was trying to challenge my mind and my mental strengths with things. Obviously, I was reaping the benefits of getting into really good shape by doing this as well, stuff like that. And that's when I just really started. All right, I used to struggle really bad with like reading and stuff like that. And then I just forced myself to sit there and read books. And I could read 300 pages and not even remember what it was, but at least I just kept doing it and kept doing it,
Yeah.
you know. And then I went from not even being able to read a book to, you know, reading 10 different bloody books, you know, but just for the mental challenge rather than, you know, I'm interested in what I'm reading. It was more to just keep getting in up here because I knew I was trying to strengthen this because I knew what I was going to face when I got out of prison. So that's what I was training for.
Yeah.
I was training for that day where reality was going to smack me in the face. It's easy in there. 3 meals get delivered to you every day. You don't pay for electricity. You're not paying for rent, you know, all this sort of stuff. So I was training for that reality day, you know, and that's where I think a lot of people in there, they make the mistake of just like, oh yeah, I'm just in prison and, you know, like wasting time and all that. But they wait till the day that they get out, then they try and figure out how they're going to tackle this huge bloody mountain that's in front of them, you know, where I started when I still had 10 years to go on my sentence, you know what I mean? So I think that's helped me in a lot of ways get to where I am today
Yes.
because I was more than ready.
Yeah.
I was ready, buddy, 5 years out. And I just kept on thinking about it, kept on going, all right, how am I going to do this? And people ask me when I got out of prison, because a lot of people, when they get out, especially after a long time like that, oh, how did you do it, like mentally and stuff like that? Like, people struggle and all that. And tell you what, hour and a half of me being out, I was good to go. You know, I just did not let that manifest in my mind whatsoever. Obviously, I had the anxious thoughts and anxiety feelings and all that, but I was that ready that I could just block it out.
Yes.
It just didn't let it overcome me. You know what I mean? So I think that that's a big tool that a lot of people have got to start learning is how to use this, you know, like practice here, you know, like.
It's interesting, Dean, you mentioned mental fitness. You know, we talk about physical fitness and why that's important, but training this, mate, you know, you have complete power upstairs. But one of the things that can be very challenging for people is being able to channel their negative energy and try and push through adversity and put it into a positive. But was that something that you already had, mate, that resiliency to push through mental barriers? Or was this a skill that you were training throughout this whole entire duration when you were incarcerated?
I think I developed that, like I was saying before, when I first quit cigarettes. Like, I know it might sound like a small thing, but that's when I sort of realized, like, hang on a minute, I've got a bit of fault up. You know what I mean? Because I see a lot of people like that. You imagine sitting in prison where there's nothing else to do. You're sitting around playing cards with people and they're sitting down just smoking. You're bored out of your brain. And I'm sitting there and I'm not having another cigarette. I smoked for like 19 years since I was like 8-year-old kid. I was smoking at home when I was 10 years old. Like, so it wasn't like a thing I only done for 6 to 12 months. Like, I'd smoked cigarettes for 19 years and then I sat down in prison in the most boring fucking place you can ever be in your life. And having this negative environment, a smoker smokes a fucking cigarette when he's bored, or he's, you know, anxious, or any sorts of feelings that they get, they go to a cigarette. And I was having all these different feelings, thoughts, stuff like that, but I still wasn't doing it. And that's when I was like, you know what? I've got something going on up here. And that's when I started using it. And I started building off that. All right, what's something else I can challenge myself with?
Yeah.
And I just knew that the day that I got released, this is the one that I needed. Like my six pack and me bloody muscles and all that were going to do nothing for me. This is the one that was going to help me.
Yes.
So,
I mean, the physique shows, mate, you know, you're in peak physical condition. And from an outside perspective, people see that as you're disciplined because the physique that you've acquired, mate, has been a long road. You've pumped the weights hard. And it was interesting, you were talking about just before we started the podcast, you had to adapt in prison because the gym wasn't there. You had to sort of modify the exercises. And even then, mate, like just hearing about that on how you were able to sort of improvise is pretty fucking incredible. And I think, mate, one of the best things young boys can do is get into some sort of combat sport, or whether it be getting them into something difficult, because doing difficult things makes you appreciate hard work. And the byproduct of that is you can sit back and think, fuck, I've just done X, Y, and Z. And you just feel so much better for it, mate. But that discipline and that mindset, and you able to sort of channel that and push through mental barriers, mate. Have you ever thought about perhaps reaching out to young boys, mate? Because I think you'd be a fantastic spokesperson for young boys. Because what's happening in the world right now, mate, and we know from stats that single parent homes produces chaos. And I think there's a term that's going around the internet right now of the male sedation hypothesis. And what that basically means, mate, is young boys are retreating to porn and video games. That's why we're not really seeing a lot of violence as such. Yes, we've had a 30% increase in violence, which is fucking crazy, and what's happening right now, especially with COVID and everything that's going on. But I think young boys need an outlet, mate. They need direction in life, because I think right now they've fallen drastically behind. Women, I think, have done exceptionally well, but I think young boys, young men, have fallen back behind, and they need someone to look up to, someone that's, you know, been through the depths, the darkest depths in their own sort of world, but then also can say, hey, look, I was where you are now. This is what I can tell you need to do. But what would be some advice to the young boys out there that are just having a really difficult time? Maybe they come from a broken home. Maybe their dad might have left them. You know, the parents are going through a divorce. You know, what would be some advice that you would give these young men?
yeah, well, I do the same with most of the people I talk to, and a lot of people reach out to me for this very subject in itself. And man, like it all comes down to, with a young man or a young woman or whatever, the parenting, that it starts there.
Yes.
If that's not there, I'm telling you, that's when the kid really suffers, you know. And I learnt that myself when I was a kid. And like I said, when mum left, she was the one who was keeping the family together. Dad was just doing what he wanted to do. But then when mum left, you know what I mean? Then I was just like, all right, what are we going to do now? Like, and that's where I found a lot of, personally myself, I just had no direction. I didn't know what I was going to do or anything like that. And I think a lot of kids are like that. They don't even know what to do.
They don't.
You could ask them, like, what do you want to do? They don't even know. And that's why they numb their fucking minds on these computer games, or, you know, like you said, porn or whatever it might be. I tell you what, sport, man, getting into sport, getting yourself healthy, changes the whole way you bloody think about stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I think kids are turning into zombies and shit like that, getting so lazy, and they're just getting their frequencies at all drop.
You're 100% right.
From
Yeah.
shit, you know what I mean? And like, back when I was growing up, like, every kid played sport at school, you know? I mean, there's so many kids these days that fucking, oh, I just want to play on my iPad, you know? They don't even want to go and interact with other kids. you know, where that's all I wanted to do. As soon as the bell rang, the first thing, where's my hat? I got to chuck my hat on, and off I'd go and bloody playing footy, cricket, whatever, punching on bloody other kids, whatever it might have been. But it was all physical stuff.
Yes.
So I think that is the main thing. Like, the parents get these kids off these bloody zombie fucking things, start getting them into some sort of physical sport. Doesn't matter what it is. You got to get that heart pumping. Now, like, I can get that, get the sweat on the brow, mate. That's fucking what's going to bring your kid to life.
Yes.
You know, I think that's, you look at, you go back generations, like 30 years, like heaps of sports stars and all this, everyone was all surrounded around cricket, fucking, you know, tennis, fucking rugby league, whatever it might be. Not so much these days. Not so much. There's a big population now of just sitting at home doing,
Yeah.
putting themselves in their room and just fucking playing games. And, you know, like I said, their frequencies are so dulled.
Yes.
They've got no fight in them. They've got no life in it.
Yeah, you're 100% right, mate. I read an alarming stat, Dean. I think it was above 50% of men aren't looking for a relationship. And I think there was another study that I read, especially during COVID lockdowns, that it was a high number. I can't remember exactly, but young men were stoned playing video games. And I think men especially, they don't have drive, which is exactly what you said, mate. And this is the fuckery we're seeing in the world right now because of this current crisis, that men have drastically fallen behind. And you said some really interesting things, mate, with regards to putting your kid into sport, because I 100% agree, mate. Like, as I said, growing up doing martial arts for over 30 years, mate, putting myself in difficult things. And this is what I think men need to do to become better, to be good at being a man. You need to go through hardship. You need to go through obstacles. And I think your whole story and how you got to where you are today was doing difficult things. And the byproduct of that is you just acquired, you know, immense success in your, not just your personal training, but your mindset. And I think, mate, you'd be fantastic to reach out to schools and young boys, mate, because, yeah, I think young boys right now, mate, they are confused as fuck about what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are. What was after you came out of prison, mate, what happened after that? Like, what was your mindset? Where did you go from there?
Well, like I was saying just before, like I practiced for that day for years, you know, like I visualized it all the time. I just knew what I was going to do, where I was going. I didn't change directions once, you know, and because I had the practice, I suppose, from going to jail when I was younger, getting out, making a mistake, ending up back in jail, whatever it might be. I knew I've been down every stupid road there is, probably 3 or 4 times, you know what I mean? So after a while, it's like, I know where that road goes. I know where that one goes too. I've done it bloody plenty of times. So cut out all the bullshit, stop pointing the finger and making the excuse of why you went down that the second or the third time, and start looking in the mirror, like I was saying before, and addressing all your shit and going, all right, I made the choice to do that. I made the choice to do that as well. Now I'm going to make the choice to do this because I don't want that sort of life for myself. So then I was just tunnel vision with that. I was just like I said, I was visualizing it every day of like, get out. I sort of knew I wasn't going to be able to go back to Rockhampton like when I got parole. Obviously, the first hurdle is trying to get parole when you're in prison. So staying out of trouble, doing all the right things, all the courses, trying to address all these sorts of things to try and improve my chances of getting parole so I didn't have to serve the full term
Yes.
sentence. But so I ticked that box. I finally got parole. And then once I did that, then I sort of expected that they weren't going to let me go home. So, and that happened. So I went to a halfway house here in Brisbane in West End, and that was just full of drug addicts and stuff like that. And just a real, like, I had a better, I had a better room in prison than I did there.
Is that right?
Yeah. So that was a challenging thing for me when I first got out too. It was like, I was released, but I felt like I went backwards, you know? But once again, I was ready for all these little hiccups. I was ready for all this sort of stuff. And I went to my parole officer and said, listen, you know, I understand this is a part of the process, but I'm not going to stay here. I've got an address to go to. I want to get this approved. It took about 3 days, and they agreed with me that this wasn't suited for me. It's like for homeless people who don't have somewhere to live. I had somewhere to live. I've got all my own stuff and all that. I had a missus waiting for me the whole time, all this sort of stuff. So I was like, this isn't the place for me. This is for homeless people that don't have a bed to sleep in.
Yes.
And then they agreed and they let me move. Anyway, so then I was like, all right, I've got to get a job. And then I got a job, and I got into high-rise construction. And I tell you what, man, like that was you think about an 11-year period of not doing any physical work in that sort of, because it's a different thing. You can be fit in the gym, but not so fit on the work side.
A different kind of fitness.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I was prepared for that as well too. And I knew that was going to be a mental challenge for me, you know, and sure enough it was. Like I went to the work site and I was busting my ass. There was concrete dust up my eyes and nose every day, and just, you know, not in prison. I had such a good routine where I had everything that I needed and I wanted to do every day. I got to do all that the way I wanted to do it. When I come out to the real world, I was like, no, you're going to do it like this. You're going to do it like this. You're going to be here at this time. You can go home at this time, you know, all this sort of stuff. So that was a mental thing as well. I was flogging myself at work, and then I'd go to the gym in the afternoon, and, you know, I'd be tired, driving to the gym, had to get my license, all this sort of stuff. So there was heaps of little things, you know, and then, yeah, so, but I tell you what, I just kept going back to like, oh, you're ready for this. This is what you've been training your mind for. You're ready for it. And sure enough, and then things just after a while, first 6 months, like every single day, I'd have this mental bloody battle in my head, you know, but once again, I just kept going back to I was ready, and sure enough, it just got easier and easier. And then I started taking on 2 jobs, you know, like, so I did my personal training course, and while I was doing the high-rise construction, and then I got my PT thing as well, because this is who I am. I'm into this sort of stuff, you know, so I knew that that was the direction I wanted to go in. You know, I'm not a book smart dude by any means. I'm never going to be a pen pusher, you know what I mean? So I was like, this is what I want to do. And I want to keep myself in check, because I want to be that, you know what I mean? I don't want to fall into just getting relaxed and stuff like that. And then I see a lot of people that come out of prison and, you know, they get out and they're fit and healthy and that because they've got a structured routine of how they used to be in prison. And then after it's only 6 months, and they just slowly just go back into all the bad habits and get unhealthy, get on drugs, turn into an alcoholic, all this sort of stuff, and then end up back in prison. I've been out nearly 5 years now, and I'll tell you, I'm probably in better shape than I was when I left prison. So I've put myself in this position because this is who I am and this is what I want to do. I want to be in check.
Yes.
That's what gets me up every day.
Yes.
You know, I want to be backed up against the wall. That's where I feel like I need to be.
Yeah.
I want to be challenged, you know.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people I find these days, they don't want to be challenged.
You're 100% right, mate.
And that's why you said they find themselves in their room playing their little games and that. No one's in there. It's just them, you know.
Yes.
Where I try and teach people, like, empty your bank account. Make yourself feel that bloody feeling of bloody you're struggling, you're backed up against the wall. That's when you're going to come out fight.
Yeah. There's 2 directions you can go in life, mates. you can hit rock bottom and let that crumble you, or you can rise above it. And, you and I, mate, we're both heavily tattooed. I have the koi fish on this side, but I also have the phoenix on this side. And the phoenix is a symbol of rising above the ashes, overcoming hardship and adversity, and channeling that into positive. And you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang around. And some of the mistakes that I've made in life, like I reflect on my own sort of path and journey, like, of course, it's fucking hard work, mate. It's difficult. It is hard work being a man. It is extremely difficult. But what would be some of the mistakes that you made, and what did you learn from those mistakes?
Obviously, getting caught up with all my mates thinking it was cool to bloody, be the tough dude, you know what I mean? Because I was very tall, but I was thin, but I loved the crack, I loved the fight when I was younger, and I had that reputation of, whenever the big dude would come along, that would be my go-to, and the mistake I think I made is just feeling like I had to live up to that name as well,
Yeah.
doing all the crazy shit. So obviously make my friends happy and thinking I'm making myself happy at the same time, but I'm the one who's getting punished for it, you know what I mean? So that was one thing that, yeah, I regret, like just big noting with the mates and all that, feeling like I had to be that, that crazy dude that did all the crazy things. At the time you feel like it's cool, but I look back at it now and I'm just like, I've wasted half my life thinking like that.
Yeah.
And I've paid some pretty big prices doing that as well, So,
Yeah. So for any young individual that I guess is listening to this can learn from this is you sort of made some really valid points, do difficult things. And I think hard things, easy life, hard things. And there's that famous quote, mate, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. I think we're going through good times now, mate, but I think what it's doing is it's creating weak men. And you look at some of the atrocities that happen in the world, mate, and I always reflect on the mass shootings that happen in America. It's fucking atrocious. I mean, don't get me started on fucking gun control and what goes on over there, mate, but their gun control laws are totally different to how we operate over here. But I look at the kids that shoot up the schools, mate, don't have proper guidance, mate. They don't have a proper father figure. And these boys, mate, that do these horrible things, if only they had a fucking good mentor, some guidance. But what would be the message for you to say to these young men that are in a bit of a dilemma? They're going down a different path in life. How would you get them to come back onto their path? What would be the message that you would say to these young men?
yeah, well, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because I've met a lot of young men that I've obviously talked to over the years as well, especially in prison as well. I took on that role of, trying to make them fucking see that all this fucking shit is not cool, mate. All you're doing is fucking your own life up, like all these people you try and impress and all this sort of stuff is only going to put you down. It's not going to lift you up. And I was always big on like not sugarcoating nothing, I'm not going to high five you when you're doing something fucking stupid, so I've always been that character. And one thing I can say, man, is like whatever's going on in your life, everyone's got a different way of thinking. Like you're saying about these kids shooting up these schools and stuff like that. Like the first thing I think about is like, where's the fucking parents? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you make the decision to have a fucking child and bring them into this fucking world, it's your obligation to be a fucking leader and a good role model for that child.
Yeah.
Like, how the fuck does the kid get to a headspace of going, I'm going to go and kill everybody? Where is mum and dad here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's probably the first thing I think about when you say something like that. I'm like, man, like, fucking, what's going on with these parents? Like, man, for them to even, for that child or that young man or whatever to get into that headspace of doing that, I'm like, man, like, I don't even know where to go with that. You know, it's just like, yeah, it's a hard one, man. Because like I said, everyone's got a different mindset too. Like, say someone's starting to get into trouble, you know, they're taking drugs, drinking alcohol with their mates, fighting with their girlfriends, whatever. They're ending up in prison for violence or drink driving or whatever it might be. Obviously, the first thing I'd say, I was like, mate, you've got to stop fucking poisoning yourself with this fucking shit. You know, like drugs, alcohol is altering your fucking mind. You know what I mean? Like, if your mind is not altered by this fucking poison, half of this stuff that you think and you act on wouldn't even be there.
Yes.
You know, so that's the first thing I always dive into is like trying to get them to see the light of like, do you want to wake up feeling happy every day, or you want to wake up miserable and fucking anxious and depressed and all this? And all this shit's coming from this drugs and alcohol, all this poison that you're giving yourself. You know, like there has not been one, like I said, I've never really got into the addiction side of things myself, but all my friends have been addicted to drugs their whole life, and I've been with them the whole time. So
Yeah.
I've got a very good understanding of this sort of stuff. And both my older brothers are drug addicts. You know, I grew up looking at them going, I don't want to be nothing like you.
Yes.
Right? But obviously I got into trouble with violence and all this sort of stuff, but I never was like a drug addict, you know? And that sort of stuff there is like, I try and show people, like, I wake up feeling fucking great every day. I wake up with energy. I wake up wanting to do something every day, you know, like, and then I ask them the same question and they can't even look at me right, give me a fucking honest answer, you know, like, you don't feel good, do you? You feel like shit, don't you? You know, like, just trying to get them to realize, mate, you get off this shit and life's going to become so much better for you, mate. You're going to think so much clearer.
Yeah.
And then once you're thinking clearer and your frequency's a lot fucking higher, you're going to start going, oh, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing this. And then you never know what door that could open as well. And then it just goes from there, you know, just being positive and doing positive things is what's going to create a better life for yourself, you know.
You made a very fucking good point just then, mate. And I reflect on purpose. And this is the problem. This is the fuckery we're seeing in the world right now is young boys are having a difficult time figuring out what their purpose is in life. And I don't know, did you ever hear about the story about the Blitz in World War II? Do you know about that, mate?
No.
So when the bombs went off back in World War II, you had these comatose patients, in particular men, who were just completely comatose, catatonic, just fucking bedridden. And when the bombs started going off and there was destruction and anarchy and there's just fucking total annihilation happening all around, there was no one to drive essential service vehicles, so ambulance and fire trucks. These men that were completely catatonic and comatose got up out of their beds and started driving fire trucks and ambulances to help the casualties. And it's that quote, mate, give a man a purpose and the ability to achieve it, and he will crawl over broken glass with a smile. And you said something there, mate, that was very fucking interesting, is continually doing the things that are positive will give you a better outlook on life. And then you said more doors will open up, mate. And you're a very disciplined person, mate. Like I've seen some of your Instagram, like you're up at fucking 2 a.m, you know, you're meal prepping, you're in the gym, you're boxing, you're lifting weights. You're a very structured, very disciplined person. And we were having a chat before, mate, and I say 80% of the time I couldn't be fucked working out, but I always do, mate. I enjoy working out, but majority of the times I couldn't be fucked. You're tired, you're lethargic, you've had a big day at work or whatever. But it's doing the things that you don't feel like doing all the time has a profound effect and a ripple effect. Like, I appreciate downtime when I've had a fucking productive day. Like when I've lifted weights, I've had a roll with a high level black belt. We've been going for about 45 minutes. And I come down and I've earned a day of rest, mate. I'll enjoy the shit out of that day. Like I'll put my feet up, have a nice drink, mate. And you don't appreciate wind down time unless you've worked for it. But you really sort of said something that was interesting with regards to purpose and finding your purpose. And this is where I think young men are really having a difficult time grasping that, mate. They don't know what their place is in the world. And you mentioned getting into the gym, but what would be some of the other things that you could recommend youngsters to do? And especially you said you were hanging around the wrong crowd. What would be some advice, as well as hitting the gym, staying, having a more positive outlook on, not associating with the delinquents, but what would be some of the things that you would encourage these boys to be doing?
Well, the first thing that I always go to is the quicker that you can find out what you want to do, the fucking better it's going to be for you. Like, a lot of people make the mistake, because, a lot of people lean on me ADHD and all this sort of stuff. So they only do like 5% of this, 5% of this, and they just go around fucking they're a scattered mess. The quicker you can find out what you fucking want to do and just attack that, like I was saying before, this is who I am. I'm a very physical fucking person. I've always been into combat sports. I've always been into all this sort of stuff and like eating, and very disciplined in my own mind. I can push through hard times with any sort of physical task.
Yeah.
Me, book smart, no good. I've tried my best with that sort of stuff, and I'm telling you, it's just not me. But when I do this other stuff, like I'm doing today, I know it's me. I know it's me. And that's why I put every fucking ounce of my energy into this sort of stuff, because this is who I am as a person. It's not like I force myself to do it. Once I start doing it, I feel alive. I'm not doing it for the meal ticket. I do it because this is who I am, and if people want to learn off me because of this, then so be it, but I'm not doing it purely just to make a bloody meal ticket, because they say, if you're doing what you love, you're not working a day in your life.
Yeah.
So fucking true. I don't wake up in the morning going, oh, I've got to go to work. I wake up because I want to go. I want to get in the gym. This is where I feel good. This is what makes me feel like I'm at home here, So that's one thing I'd be able to say to the young dudes is the quicker you can find out what you want to do, and then I'm telling you, do that fucking thing every fucking day until you fucking fall over, mate.
Yeah.
So that's a good bit of advice. If you want to be successful at something, you've got to do that fucking thing every fucking day.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. The price of progress, mate, is pain.
Yeah. Definitely.
And you nailed it, mate. It's interesting, with everything that you've achieved in such a short amount of time. What is the hope that you want to give? Like, what is the positive impact, which you're already doing, mate? You're making a fucking positive impact. But what is some goals that you've got in mind? Because you're a very busy personal trainer, mate. But what are some of the things that you'd like to look at doing long term?
Well, that's obviously I've got an online business going as well as my face-to-face stuff in the gym. Eventually, I'd like to build my online business enough where I'd be able to step away from the face-to-face and then start focusing on other things. And like you said, helping people who are going down the same track as I did, that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
Man, like when I can help someone else, it makes me feel good, like going and buying a fancy car or like a big house and all that, bloody, that wears off after a while. I've said it on one of my stories once before. It's like, you go buy the fancy car and the big house. guarantee you 12 months down the track, it's just another house and it's just another car. You know, you're not getting that endorphin release. And, you know, like when I help someone and I can see them actually turn into or do the thing that I'm asking them to do, and then I can see it puts a smile, I can see them come to life, mate. I can see the glow come out. That's what makes me feel good, you know. So if I can help anyone who's going down the same sort of path that I used to go to, and I can sort of steer them away from that to not make them mistakes that I did, and then to see them do well after that as well, that's winning for me, mate.
Yeah.
Happy there.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of youth crime, mate. You know, as I said, we've had a 30% increase in crime across the country. And when COVID happened and the lockdowns were going on, a lot of people were doing it tough, mate. You know, you had a rise in domestic violence. You had theft, vandalism. I think you even had homicide as well, mate. And I think right now, mate, you know, they need people like you. And I think, you know, just hearing about your story, that you'd be a fantastic motivational speaker to speak with young kids in schools to get them on the right path. Would that ever be something that you would look at doing? You know, going and talking about, you know, getting kids on the right path, getting them into fitness, you know, getting them into martial arts or something like that? Would that be something that you would like to do as well?
I'd definitely like to do something like that, mate, because like I said, you know, I've made every mistake that you can think of, you know what I mean? And I've done it a few times. So, like, and I know where every path goes, you know, so getting into a young bloke's head and asking them, you know, just getting them to be truthful with me in the way that they think and all that, not sugarcoating nothing. And then I can sort of break it down for them exactly what's going to happen and what would happen over here if you started doing this sort of stuff. So I think it's obviously talking to a group is a good thing, but I'd also like to get into them individually as well, because everyone's got a different brain in their skull, you know what I mean? And everyone thinks a little bit differently. So the hardest bit there is, like I said, getting into the individual and then getting them to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That's where you make the progress there. Because a lot of kids these days are influenced by other stuff, you know, so they think they've got to act a certain way or think a certain way or whatever it might be, but that's not exactly who they are.
Yeah.
That's the trick with that sort of stuff. Like, I can go and talk to a whole group of kids and all that. Like, you know, it would be good if even just one of them listened and turned their fucking life around, you know. But obviously, I know because I used to be a rat bag kid too myself one day, and you see that you sort of need to make the mistakes yourself to learn from it, don't you?
Yes.
It's only every now and again someone will go and listen to you and then turn it all around without making that mistake. Like, I've got even got young men that I train, they're 20 years old, and every time I'm training them, I'm into them about all these sorts of things, and nearly everything I talk about happens to them, you know, but they still got to make the mistake themselves, you know, before they bloody learn.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I was one of them kids myself.
Yes.
You know, so
Yeah. What would be some advice, mate, you could give to just men in general? Because we know that there's a mental health crisis as well, mate. We know the stats, mate, that 1 in 3 men between the ages of 25 to 44, the most dangerous time at that point in duration of their life is between that window when they're most likely to kill themselves. We know the suicide rate is higher in men than it is in women. Men have a very difficult time expressing their emotions. And I think, mate, you need a brotherhood. You need a partner, obviously, a romantic partner that's going to accept vulnerability. And this gets fucking thrown all over the internet, mate. It does my fucking head in about some of these red pill content creators saying never open up to your woman, never be vulnerable in front of your woman because she'll use that as ammunition and weaponize it against you. And not for any instance am I saying cry because your partner turned off your PlayStation. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying crying like a little bitch, but there is acceptable moments for men to express their vulnerability in a healthy way. And that can be expression in martial arts, getting into a sport, something like that, mate. But what would be some advice for the men out there, mate, that are having a difficult time expressing their emotions and don't know who to turn to?
Yeah, well, like you said, mate, you've got to have a balance. I think you've got to have a little bit of vulnerability. If you have got a partner or something like that, you need a little bit of vulnerability with them as well. It's important. Like, how many times have you seen someone like get worked up and then they actually have a cry and then they feel better afterwards? It's because they're letting go of all that fucking anxiousness, all that anger and all that, sadness inside. It's like a release valve, you know what I mean? So anyone who does feel like that inside, don't be afraid to fucking let it out sometimes, especially if it is with your partner, but I'll tell you what, like men have got to do fucking, you've got to do men things too, get around, like you said, a brotherhood, go kick the footy around, go fucking have a wrestle or whatever it might be, hit the fucking boxing bag or something. I'll tell you what, the endorphins that get released from exercise can change the whole way you fucking think about stuff. Like, even though it might be difficult at the time, I'm telling you, once you've got a bit of sweat on you and stuff like that, I'm telling you, you just relax, you loosen up, you're warm, all that type of stuff. And I think exercise is probably the best thing for mental health.
Yeah.
So many people are turning to medication and all these little band-aid fucking things. I'm telling you, it does not fix you.
Yeah.
It might dull the fucking pain.
It just numbs it.
Yeah. But as soon as that wears off, it's coming back again. You've got to take another one. You know what I mean? So I strongly believe that exercise is the cure to fucking mental health when it comes to depression and anxiety and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And even with females too, man, I'm telling you, I train a lot of females. And a lot of them are emotional about certain things, but I can tell you when I smash them in a fucking workout, they might fucking whinge about it, but afterwards, the biggest smiles are on their faces. And I'm telling you, they walk out of it wounded, but I'm telling you, they're happiest they're going to, because they've accomplished something hard.
Yeah.
Like you were saying before, doing hard shit, I'm telling you, man, like, when you don't think you can do something, but then you go and do it and you actually crush it, then you're like, I'm telling you, that puts a smile on your face, mate. And that's a real smile too.
Yeah. And that's a better dopamine release than
100%.
anything, mate. Like, you posted a video, mate, on Instagram about people on their phones and how much of a distraction they are. Because it's just fucking constant, this shit, isn't it? It's just constant, dopamine release. But see, you can get natural dopamine release in exactly what you said, mate. It's doing difficult things. It's the accomplishment and the gratification that you get after doing something that's difficult. I call it voluntary adversity, so, and I always reflect on my martial arts background. When I'm in there rolling with a high level black belt, it's fucking hard work. We're going at it. We're trying to tap each other out. And, even in sparring, it's getting kicked, getting punched, you're banged up and bruised. But after you've banged on, both of you walk away from that feeling better, but also you're better for it, and I think it's completely healthy, mate, to put yourself in difficult situations. Look at the whole trend with the ice bath thing, mate. People are jumping in the cold. It's difficult because your brain's thinking, oh, fuck, I feel like I'm going to fucking die. Have you done an ice bath before? Yeah. How long did you go for, mate?
I've done all sorts of stupid shit. I've tried the challenge, but 30 minutes is my longest one.
In the ice bath?
Yeah. Yeah, my lips are blue.
It's a fucking long time, mate. That's impressive.
Yeah, I've done it. It's just tested, because like I said, I like to do things like this. I'm like, this is fucking hard.
Yeah.
I'm going to fucking have a crack at it.
Yes.
And so.
Would that be one of the hardest things you've ever done?
Yeah, when I first started doing them, obviously I didn't get 30 minutes first go, you know what I mean? But that was definitely difficult, man, because I'm not really fond of bloody real cold fucking stuff.
Yeah.
But once I started doing it and realizing what it was doing for me, then I want to do this.
Yeah.
And then even like just every morning I have a cold shower, bloody every single time, just because of how it makes me feel when I get out. At the time, it sucks. Like everyone says, "Oh, I love that man, they're talking shit," but when you get out of that shower and you dry yourself off, I'm telling you, it's like you fucking just had a pre-workout and you're ready to go and smack some weights around or have a fucking spa or whatever.
You're getting high on your own supply.
Man, I'm telling you, that's why I love it. And then I started testing the waters. Those 5 minutes. See if I can get 10 minutes, and 10, then 20, then 30. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
And it's all just, it's no really, it's not I'm not getting anything out of it. Like, it's more for my mental doing something difficult and overcoming it. The whole time, it's telling me to get the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whole time. Like, you get over 10 minutes, I'm telling you, it's like you're just getting a different feeling. And then I just see how long I can just go.
Yeah.
And then I got to like the 20-minute mark where I'd been before and I wanted to get out, but then I was like, no, you're going to stay in here.
Yeah.
And then I just pretty much just did minute on minute after that. I wasn't looking at 30-minute mark. I was just looking at like, one more minute. And then I'd get that minute, then I'd be like, all right, one more minute. Same as when I like do planks and that, I'm just doing planks and that as well.
You're sitting there and you're fucking shaking.
Yeah.
You're like,
And I just do it a minute at a time, so yeah.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. Like, it's really hard. Everything's telling you to stop. Hey, you got nothing. Come on.
That's fucking remarkable, mate. Here in the ice bath.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Bruce Lee once said, you will never know your limits unless you go beyond them.
Yeah.
And Muhammad Ali said another quote, impossible is nothing. And it's just that mental barrier. And this sort of reflects back on what you said with when it's hard, when the going gets tough, pushing beyond that and pushing past that limit, because there's that line, there's that threshold where we get to, whether it be that last rep on the bench press or whether it be that extra kilometer that we do in a marathon or ultra marathon even, it's pushing past that barrier. What is that voice inside your head, mate, that tells you to keep going? How do you channel that and how do you push past? Because I call that my inner bitch. There's a part of me that just wants to quit, but this is a skill that you're very good at, mate. How do you combat that with that little voice inside your head that wants to quit, but you just say, no, fuck you, we're going to keep going?
Yeah, well, I'm very competitive. Like, I've always been like, and that's like I was saying about basketball earlier on when I was a kid. Like, I was very competitive, so I always went that extra mile, and I had done it from an early age. And then now I feel like I used to do some pretty like hard things in prison, like say going for, like a 5K run and seeing how fast I could run it. And each time I'd do it, I'd make sure I'd beat that last one. And then I started getting sub 20-minute runs and that when I was 110 kilos. Not many 110 kilos can run a bloody sub 20-minute 5K.
Fucking hell.
And all these little things, I used to just challenge myself with that. But the voice in my head, like you were just talking about, it's like, I don't know, man. Maybe there's that fight. I think it's controlled aggression, you know what I mean? Like, I reckon if I was being honest, it would be my dad was a very aggressive man, like really, really aggressive when any sort of fighting, anything, very aggressive. And I think I got handed down that through him. But I've always been a very well-natured kid, but I've got that switch as well that I didn't practice that. I just had it in me all the time. And I think it comes from my dad.
Yes.
And when when I'd do hard things and I'd start to get tired, I don't know, that little switch in me is like, you're weak. Then I'd just come back to life and I'd just find
Yeah.
another gear and another gear.
Yeah.
Everyone that I used to like box with and stuff like that, we could be 10 rounds in and, obviously I'm tired and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just get that little, I could just find another gear, even though I was physically gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something mentally would get me. And then all of a sudden I'd feel like I'm fresh again.
Yeah.
And I think it was that controlled aggression.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah, that's it.
Isn't it interesting, mate? Like when you're in the gym, right? You're on your final set and you're fucked. Like I can reflect on some pretty hectic workouts I've done, mate, where I feel like I've vomited, I've thrown up, mate. And you get to that point where you're like, Jesus, like, I don't know if I can do another rep. But there's that little voice inside your head. You've got a bit more in you. You know what I mean? You've got a little bit more in you to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep pushing, bust through that plateau. And these are all important building blocks to becoming a better man.
Yeah.
And this always reflects back on, what we were talking about with regards to voluntary adversity, putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, because that is the building blocks for you to become better, that 1% better every day. So what about your personal training business, mate? Do you have a bit of a mixture of men and women, or do you mainly train female athletes, or what?
I've got a good mixture, actually. It's pretty even. Yeah, it's pretty even across the board. I think I've had a lot of success with female trainers because, I don't know, I just maybe because I've been doing this sort of stuff a long time. And I'm pretty good with communicating with people because all these little feelings and that I have, I know everyone else has them as well. And I really tap into that side of things. So I've always been really good at talking to people and understanding everyone. It's not just about being a trainer. I think it's a bit of a mentor, you can be some people's bloody therapist too at some stage as well, and I think I've always been a really good listener and stuff like that.
You are, mate. Yeah.
So I think that's helped a lot with training females because I tell you what, it's easier training a female than it is a male.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
Females take a lot, they take direction so much easier than a male does. And I think an ego might have something to do with it.
Yeah, true.
So I find that everything I explain and show to a female, they will pick it up, mate, so much quicker than a male.
Yeah.
I have to break down their walls as a male and just fucking take their egos away from them. And there's so much that goes into getting them to do and feel and think the way I need them to be at that very moment.
Yeah.
Where females, I don't know, they absorb information so much better.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's got to be because of the ego. It's got to be.
Yeah, that's interesting, mate. Would you say that females can connect with you on an emotional level because women tend to prioritize friendship, but also they enjoy the idea of conversing, but also they're emotional in the sense that they're very emotional, but you're able to connect with these women on an emotional level. You can really understand and listen, and they sort of can take direction from you. Would you say that women feel comfortable in that sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I've been told numerous times that I can go to two different worlds. I can be really like the way my presence and my body language is with a male, depending on which male it is, I'm very good at matching their energy.
Yes.
As a character as well. So I find that that's really gave me a lot of success with that, and I can adjust to the females really well, where my body language and the way I talk and stuff like that would be totally different to say I was training someone like you who's got a background in martial arts and stuff. I I know how to train you. I know how to get the best out of you and how to talk to you as well. Where I wouldn't do that same sort of thing to a female who, you know, depends on what sort of athlete they are.
Yeah.
You know, if they're um just a normal girl who wants to tone their glutes up and, you know, get a bit stronger and a bit more confident and all that sort of stuff. So there's a certain way that I would talk and act with a person like that. But say someone like yourself, like I'd get you fucking balls up against the wall and I'd make you fucking work for it. You know what I mean? Because that's what you want.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you need from me. That's why you're coming to me.
Yeah.
You're not coming to me for me to fucking sit down and listen to all your fucking, you know, your problems and stuff like that. Where sometimes different characters might be having a certain day too. Some days they're a weapon. Some days I can tell that they're fucking, we're not breaking records today. You know what I mean? So I think I'm really good at being like a chameleon and not just matching their energy. And, you know, like obviously fucking life throws curveballs at you all the time, you know? So
Yeah.
not everyone's going to be on 100% every time either.
What's really remarkable about you, mate, is I can see a massive difference in your style of training or approach to how you train your clients in comparison to some other fitness trainers. And this to me, mate, really reflects what a good PT is you, and by just listening to you as well, you really show intent. You know, you have compassion, you have empathy towards your clients. You want what's best for your clients. What do you think is some of the things that need to happen in the fitness industry, especially in regards people that have a large social media following? They might be an influencer, but they forget on what it's all about. It's not fucking about you. It's about your client. It's about you getting that client of yours to the next level. And I think this is one of the things that social media has kind of done is it's more opened up to very vain people, if that makes sense. It's all about them when it should be about your clients. What do you think is some of the things that need to happen in the fitness industry?
One thing I've noticed a lot being in this industry is a lot of personal trainers make the mistake of thinking there's only one way to skin a cat. You know what I mean? Like they think the way that they train is how everyone else should train as well. And that's why you'll see a lot of bloody unsuccessful personal trainers because they're trying to train to whatever individual that works for them. I think I'm really good at finding what works for the individual. And the first thing I ask a client is like, all right, what's the goal? You coming to me, tell me what you want from me. What's the goal? I already know from all my experience of stuff, I know exactly what I need to do to an individual, but the most important thing is what they want.
Yes.
They're the one coming to me because they want help with whatever it might be. So that's going to be my main priority is whatever they want. It's not what I want. I can advise you to do this, right, but I've got to listen to what they want. And then once they tell me what they want, then I map it out for them and go, to achieve this, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this and this. And if you're happy with that, then we start, all right, and then we start putting ideas together. And then I start putting a structured thing together, all right? For us to get there, we've got to go tick all these other things as well. And once you can address all that with your client, then they've got a direction instead of just turning up going, oh, it's PT day today. What are we doing? You know what I mean? Like they've got to have a vision as well.
Yeah.
You know, I can see the vision because I've been here a long time.
Yes.
But I need them to see the vision as well.
Yes. Yeah. One of the most successful trainers, Nick Mitchell, who is a very well-known millionaire entrepreneur, but when he was back in the days training and PTing people, he used to get his clients to fall in love with eating greens and veggies. what is some of the things that you adopt to help your clients achieve success? Like, how do you get them to fall in love with the idea of consistency and delay gratification? Like, how do you, what are some of the strategies that you do there?
I paint the picture for them and show them what that size picture looks like of what they're wanting.
Yes.
So I don't sugarcoat anything. I go, all right, well, if this is what you want to do, this is what we're going to have to do for this period of time. And then I break it all down to consistency, all the little curveballs that life's going to throw at you and all that. So I try and cover a broad range of what you're going to experience. And obviously, me going down all these paths myself, it makes it a lot easier for me to talk to them about it because I've done exactly what they want to do. I've done it. You know what I mean? So I know all the little curveballs that are going to come up. You know, I know all this sort of stuff. And if they're still willing to do that, then I'm like, right, I'm excited. I hope you are. Let's get to work. So that's one thing I think I do really well is I break it all down.
Yes.
I'm definitely not trying to talk them out of it. I'm just showing them this is what it takes, you know, to achieve whatever goal that you want to do. Some are bigger than others, some are smaller. It doesn't matter. But I give them a vision and I show them the path.
Yeah.
And if you want to do it, all right, let's go.
Yeah. And what about life coaching, mate? You know, would there be some sort of avenue that you could integrate personal training and life coaching, you know, because mindset, as you were talking about before, mates, is more important than the actual training itself. If up here's all fucked up, you're not going to achieve the desired outcome. But do you think there could be an avenue for you, mates, to integrate life coaching as well?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I could do that because that's one thing I think I've had a little bit more time than a lot of people because I was isolated in the area of, you know, jail for such a long period of time. I've had more time to sit there and spend on this sort of stuff where people out here in the real world, they've got so many other things going on. They got work, they got bloody family, kids, they all so many other distractions. I didn't have any of these distractions. So I think I've got a little hand up here.
Yeah.
I've used that to my advantage and I've spent a lot more time on it than the average person would. But then I'm not going to say I'm a professional at anything, but whatever it might be, I know what you need to do with your mindset to achieve that. I might not even know what subject it is, but I can definitely show you the best way for your mind to be to achieve that. You know what I mean? So,
yes.
Yeah, I might not, you know, have a trade in that area at all, but I definitely know I could show them how to use their mind the right way for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you got anything up and coming, mate? Have you got anything exciting? Like you were saying before that you're thinking about maybe stepping in the ring or?
Yeah, well, every time I've tried to do that lately, mate, I keep dislocating my shoulder, so it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things. I've thought about having surgery on it, and I've talked to the specialist and that, and I've got at least, you know, 4 months of downtime.
Yeah.
You know, and I need my arm for my work.
Yes.
So this would be one thing that I'd look more into. Like I said, if I can expand my online stuff enough where I could step away from the face-to-face, then I could probably have downtime off my arm and then I could probably get it done. And it's obviously a big process.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what's held me back lately. It's just like I need, so I've, you know, I keep saying I keep feeding my ego. I just want to sort of get in and have some fights and stuff like that because, you know, it's what I love doing, you know, but I've also got to put food on the table for the family as well.
Yeah.
That's the main priority for me at the moment.
What about stem cells, mate? I got a mate of mine. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt as well, and he came onto my podcast too. But he went over to Tijuana, Mexico, and he got stem cells done. But I've spoken to numerous people about stem cells and what it can do, and this is the whole thing with medicine, mate. Like, I mean, medicine's come a fucking long way, but would that be something that perhaps you would be open to trying, like even stem cells?
Mate, like if like the anything that works, like I'm a big fan of, you know what I mean? But it's most things is like you don't know if it's going to work. You can hear all these people give these reviews and stuff like that, and you get excited about a lot of things, eh? But like, man, I've also been training since I was 19 years old. Like, and like I was just saying before, I've had the opportunity where I've been isolated away, and I've fucking thrashed my body a lot.
Yeah.
And in there, you haven't got your massages, you haven't got your punch, you haven't got any of that rehab stuff. You know, at the very best, you're going to get a Panadol and fucking drink some water. So you imagine over a, you know, say the last 11-year period, I've got nothing else to do. I'll go to work in jail for a few hours, earn me bloody $24 a week or whatever it might be. And the rest of the time, I'm bloody eating broccoli stems and doing push-ups and chin-ups and shit, and, you know, like punching the boxing bag and stuff like that. So I'm getting a minimum of 2 hours of training, like, every single day. And only time I was having off was when I injured myself. That's the only time. So you imagine how many more hours of training I've thrashed my body with than someone out here who's living in the real world. All these other distractions. You add up over an 11-year period, like a couple of hours every day, unless I was fucking injured. Like, there's a lot of training out.
Yeah.
So my body is a lot more thrashed than most people at my age would be because of that, you know. But like, like I said, I just keep fucking showing up, and I was just that mindset thing of like, I'm bloody sore in so many places, but I don't let it stop me though.
Yeah. Is there a part of you, mate, that says, even though you're in agony, you're in pain sometimes, what you've achieved is amazing? And, you know, I always think about regret, mate, and I think about the things that you don't do. You never regret the things that you do. Obviously, you can have regret for doing dumb shit.
Yeah.
But the things that you don't do, but I'm sure your mindset, you wouldn't regret anything.
Yeah, it's, well, especially the life that I'm living now. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've had a very negative part of my life, but it's like I've turned that negative into a positive thing now. So it's sort of like obviously I regret, you know, I've probably, you know, embarrassed my fucking parents or whatever. Like, you know, like I've done some silly things. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, a lot of people, when they think about going to jail for violence, like, I've never started a fight in my life. I've always, someone's bloody done something to me and fucking engaged with me, and then I've had a fight. And
Yeah.
I've never been a bully. I bully the bully. That's if I see someone fucking bullying someone, I don't like it at all. So I've always been that person. But I suppose a lot of people that agree to, you know, the jail side of things, it's just, they're all just really bad people. And obviously I've made a lot of mistakes and I've broken the law and done some fucking stupid things, but I've never been a fucking nasty person who just hurts people.
Yeah.
But I've turned such a negative thing into a positive thing now. I sort of feel like it's given me energy, mate.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was a bad time in my life, and, you know, I've probably fucking upset a lot of people along the way as well. But I'm trying to turn it back around.
And, mate, you're doing an amazing thing right now. And, you know, we need more people like you in the world, mate. We really do, to bring this back into what we were talking about in youngsters, being able to channel that into a positive way. I got to tell you, mate, I could fucking talk to you for hours just about everything and anything that you're doing, mate, regarding fitness, and it's pretty fucking incredible, mate, and what you've achieved. But whereabouts can people find you, Dean? You're on all the socials, mate?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, yeah.
Yep.
MarxyFit,
Yep.
marxyfit.com. Yeah,
Yep.
that's my website, and MarxyFit's my Instagram as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm the UFC gym in Ashmore in the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
Anyone wants to come down for a bloody session.
So anyone that's in the Gold Coast area, mate, get your fucking ass down to the UFC gym and train with you, mates.
That's right, all different types of people too, you know.
Yeah.
Anyone who thinks they've got what that takes,
Yeah.
I'll put you to the test.
Love it, Dean, mate. It's been an honour sitting down with chatting to you, mate. And yeah, mate, I just look forward to seeing where you're going to go from here. And you know, as I said, I see you talking to kids in schools, and you know, talking about, you know, your past experiences, because kids need to fucking listen to that. They really do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks again, Dean.
Thanks very much, mate.
An honour, mate.
That was really good.